Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here at Access. I realize I can't see everyone. First of all, I'd like to note that I am made up entirely of strong opinions. And second of all, I would like to note that this is a broad concept presentation. So instead of dealing in tech, I'll be speaking in broad terms about accessibility regarding digital collections. So you'll have to forgive my non-tech speak. And third, all of my slides are very text-heavy because I'm going for the sort of meta concept of not being ocular-centric. I have one image that you'll see, and I will be reading the text on the slides just to be more accessible. So the issue, it occurred to me rather late in my digital collections profession, rather late in the game, that our focus is centered primarily on what we and our users can see, which is natural. That's the majority of materials that we have. But realizing how problematic this is in terms of accessibility, I also began to wonder how most of the tech tools we use in this industry attempt to partially fix the problem of accessibility. So much like a Band-Aid covers a wound, we're not necessarily looking at preventing an injury, but rather responding to it. As I said, strong opinions. So our optical frameworks and alt text are very good beginnings. I am by no means indicting the tech that we use or digital collections broadly speaking, but I am arguing that the content we digitize is ocular-centric, the methods by which we present content is ocular-centric, and the tech tools we're more likely to use and advance, like IIIF and screen readers, magnification software, are either ocular-centric or they put the onus entirely on the user so that they can access content and use it. So my framework, what are the accessibility implications of ocular-centric bias or visual bias? Is ableism encouraged through the authority structure inherent in digital librarianship? And is there a second layer of cognitive or implicit bias to consider during the creation process? My answer for all of these questions is yes. My research. To answer these questions, I perused major digital collections from university libraries across the United States, as well as some state libraries, and I collected baseline statistics on what percentage of their collections are accessible by some means other than sight. To be clear, I'm strictly speaking of audio and visual, but not moving image. I conducted a literature review that involved the centuries-old epistemology behind ocularcentricity, as well as the prevailing best practices in digital collections. And to inform myself fully, I looked at WHO, World Health Organization statistics regarding vision, as well as social science studies about learning behaviors. And then over time, I just began to wonder when the word digital became synonymous with what I refer to in my terrible grammar as nearly exclusively visual in libraries. I know you all know the definitions, but just so you know how I'm using them, I'd like to discuss how I'm defining these terms, thereby drawing clear parameters around my discussion. Ocularcentricity, or ocularcentrism, as defined by Oxford Reference, is the perceptual and epistemological bias ranking vision over other senses in Western cultures. Similar phrases you might have heard include hegemony of the eye, visualism, privileging vision over other means of sensory perception. Ableism is defined as intentionally discriminatory beliefs and practices against those who are othered by their physical, intellectual, or psychiatric disabilities. Since unintentional discrimination is generally classified as ignorance, I'd prefer to remove the intentionality from this discussion, as any ableist practices are discriminatory whether they're intended or not. And digital collections, in this particular case, refers to items that are either born digital or digitized from special collections. I'm not referring to more scholarly communications endeavors that have theses, dissertations, any serials, databases, or streaming services that libraries provide. Okay, illustrating visual bias. So the roots of ocularcentricity, it's a vision-generated, vision-centered interpretation of knowledge, truth, and reality. It does span over 8 centuries in the Western Hemisphere. So it shapes organizational theory and practice, and therefore I feel it shapes librarianship. And as a paradigm, it only seems to encounter criticism through the lens of philosophical discourse and distinction. So what do I mean by that? There seems to be a gaping and notable lack of literature that discusses ocularcentricity as ableist or discriminatory. It's mostly just discussed as an epistemological modality or an operationalized truth, or sometimes an anthropological truth. So I found a couple of sources discussing ocularcentricity as ableist in academia and museums. Just the two. The latter, Born Digital resource, is no longer accessible online. All I could find was a citation. So that seemed sort of like a play within a play for my research. Accessible in name only. And as we've seen, we do operationalize tools to make things more accessible. That's what this conference is all about. And we also have a great deal of policies at our universities and colleges and historical societies. So by no means, again, is this an indictment of digital collections as a profession or a concept. But the primary method while interacting with these collections is sight. That's your primary sensory perception. This is problematic for several reasons. Not only is it an accessibility issue for those with partial or no sight, and the low estimate of that is 20% of the global population. That statistic is 9 years old, and it comes from the WHO. And again, it's the low estimate. But research also tells us that 30% of people learn via information that's paired with audio components or auditory learning. So you have two really big groups in your global population that can't necessarily access your visual collections. And you might say, but Megan, we don't need everyone to access our collections, or you might want to make that argument. And while I hear you, I feel that we're creating content or digitizing the content for education and for the purpose of access. So we should really be looking at these large communities that we're not currently targeting. Additionally, the onus of paying for accessibility software is not on the institution digitizing and creating access to the data, it's on the user. So with a little bit of digging, I found that screen readers cost an average of $1,000 for a home edition software. And this is a pricey reality that directly correlates with the statistics on who globally uses accessibility software. It's no surprise it would be your Western developed nations. So Canada, the US, Europe, and the UK. It's 83% of everyone who uses screen readers. So as I'm going through and I'm looking at the data that's out there and I'm realizing the data that's not out there, I decided I would conduct a small assessment of 25 United States State University Library and Ivy League digital collections repositories. I'm just going to look through them. I'm going to use them to find out whether or not my theory is, borne out with the data. Repositories were chosen based on two very simple criteria: searchability, you'd be surprised how many digital collections you cannot search across, and their large size, so anything over 50,000 items. The 25 digital collection repositories held a cumulative 25,952,853 items, with a cumulative 65,928 of those items being strictly audio, again, not moving image. So this meets the definition of both ocular-centric and ableist in many ways. Eventually, 50 university libraries will be evaluated based on the criteria that I just enumerated for you, and I will then publish the research that I have, and I'm cracking through this presentation, but it will be far less thin of an explanation in the paper. I don't know how well that turns out. Hopefully it turns out really well. This is the pie chart, the one image that I have for you, visual versus oral digital collections. The visual items are in dark gray, and the oral items are in a light gray. It's that sliver that you see going straight up, and I just found it terribly sad and interesting at the same time. So the data does bear out that we're focusing strictly on visual collections. Why is this a problem? Well, we have to consider hegemony and the cycle of information representation, right? The implications are fairly apparent and not favorable in the least in terms of accessibility. Very few collections signal as audio, and screen readers do rely on alt text and metadata to describe images to completely or partially blind people. It's just now becoming a best practice in the last 5 years, I'd say, in my experience. And so visual collections are in the clear majority. What this indicates is not only that the content being digitized needs to evolve to meet needs, but that the selection process might be inherently biased towards sight as well. It could also indicate that we don't actually have enough collections that are audio-based. So is there a reason that we cannot provide audio transcriptions along with text transcriptions? Is there something stopping us from selecting more audio materials? Are we not collecting enough oral information in special collections libraries? What policies are dictating our collection development, curation, selection, digitization, and description? Access to content and literacy. Whether we're presenting digitized or born digital content online, we're clearly choosing to follow the well-trod path of visual bias. By making these authoritative choices for our users, we are reinforcing the cycle of discrimination that has been present against those with disabilities throughout the ages. So we're literally just digitizing the content that was made for folks who couldn't access it in the first place. It was made for a certain group of people, and we're just perpetuating that. I class this as hegemony, social and educational hegemony, not the political or military-based kind. So I consider it active discrimination. Again, strong opinions, and I feel that this perpetuates the trope that is literacy is for the chosen and not for all. I love this quote to illustrate how I felt in doing the research. Literacy is an infrastructure that regulates movement. This metaphor of literacy as mobility is of the utmost importance to the intersections between literacy and ability, illiteracy, and disability. Literacy has been used to tightly control the movement and rights of disabled people for centuries. This deeply affects what literacy is and what it can do for anyone. Solutions, multimodal digital collections. We could have textual, linguistic, spatial, oral, and visual resources combined together. Obviously, I am not a proponent of minimal computing because I want a little bit more in digital collections. I love the process, but I think we need to deliver a more multimodal product for folks when we create digital collections. We could pair visual collections with audio narratives that read metadata and intonate and emphasize important information for users. Audio tours were huge in museums in the 1990s. What happened to that? We could take time to create transcripts for audio, video, and visual materials instead of claiming it takes too long. And we have a lot of tools, and we have a lot of process. Earlier today, I heard someone say there's a lot of talk at a committee, but not a lot of operationalizing. What I hear, a refrain across institutions, is that creating transcripts takes too much time. We could create, disseminate, and analyze results from user surveys, which a lot of institutions are doing now more frequently. And this could tell us what kind of content, access and use, and accessibility needs our users actually desire, as opposed to us guessing and hoping that we're right. We could take the time to create alt tags and alt text along with the transcriptions. That's another thing, is, it takes a really long time. I don't know if we can put that in our workflow. And finally, to the antithesis of me speaking very quickly, we could engage not only in slow digitization, but slow metadata and slow digital collection planning. I have 2 slides of references, and I am done. I would like to thank you all for inviting me here and having me speak. And if you would like to be in touch about any of the ideas that I just threw out there, please contact me. I am at the University of South Carolina Libraries, and I have both of my email addresses available there. Thanks. Taking questions now. Thought it was afterwards.
I can moderate for you.
I'm sorry.
Relax.
Okay.
No. Does anyone have any questions for Megan about her presentation? Oh, good.
Did you get time to look at Native American oral history or audio recordings?
No, I haven't drilled down that far, but that's part of the additional research. This is going to take me quite some time to go through oral histories, particularly because they are so robust, but I haven't had a chance yet. Thank you.
Through your research, is there a digital collection out there that you would say is very, very good that we could look at as an example?
I don't have one yet that's very, very good. I'm seeing glimmers, and people are creating more multimodal collections in sort of the museum fashion, as it were. And I feel that the work we're doing, it's a thin line between having like a digital museum when in fact it's being created by librarians and archivists. So I am looking for those types of collections, and I will have that in the published paper. Yes, that's on my mind, is definitely being positive and saying, here's what's going really well. And I don't mean to name or shame anyone in the list of folks that, the institutions that I'm reviewing. It's more that I took a representative sample than anything else. Thanks.
Thanks. One more?
So I was just curious, you talk about transcriptions, but reading a transcription is inocular. So can you explain a little more? That's a bit confusing.
Yes, so I would like folks to actually create the audio narrative that reads the transcriptions instead of having a screen reader attempt to read the metadata and get stuck on something. Screen readers are very hinky, and so I don't know that it's that much additional work to record an MP3 where you read your metadata. Yeah, I know I'm asking for additional work here from everyone, but I think it would really contextualize the information much more than just a simple skeletal metadata record.
One more, Kate?
Thank you very much. It's very inspiring. So you talked about a two group of people. One say maybe they have a visual problem. Another one maybe have hearing problem, right? So there's a lot of kind of group. They may be economically equipped, so they cannot afford a laptop, cannot afford a wireless smartphone, and then they will have accessibility problem as well. And then how big are those group? So. Are you considering their accessibility as well?
I am. I'm not sure that it's this paper necessarily, but what I'm dealing with strictly refers to folks with internet access, and that's already not global, much less the access to the technology that they would need to access digital collections at home. Or not on campus. So I am considering it. I'm struggling with the scope of the paper as it is. But yes, that is a concern as to how people actually obtain access to the adaptive tech that they need in the first place. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question? All right. Thanks so much, Megan.
Thank you.